to the Goal Difference podcast. It is Lola and Scarlett back again to talk about Arsenal and Liverpool. Scarlett, last time we were on the mic, I was giving you therapy about cup finals, and it seems, according to the agenda, that on this episode you would like some more therapy, but this time about title run-ins. Is that right?
I think I just need therapy in general, actually, Lola.
Yes, well, I certainly agree with that. We're off to a good start if we're agreeing with each other. But look, everybody, therapy's good. And you can get therapy if you join BetterHelp. No, I'm joking, but BetterHelp, if you would like to sponsor the podcast, we're always open. Look, today we are going to talk about the title run-in. We're going to talk about Arsenal's quadruple charge, which is now over. Scarlett, it's over. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, before the Southampton game, I was able to say, no, the quad's still on because Tottenham could still go down. But it's just the treble on the table for Arsenal now, sadly. Yeah.
That took me way too long to get that joke. Listeners, I don't know if you can tell by our ragged appearances, but it's fairly early in the morning. I'm suffering with terrible hay fever. I don't know what Scarlett's suffering with, but she's definitely suffering with something. Okay, so let's dive in. You've had the good result now at Sporting. I almost feel that talking about that performance is somewhat irrelevant because Arsenal stopped the rot, and that's what was most important after Wembley and Southampton. Talk to me about this period in Arsenal's season. Where are you at with it? Are you angry? Are you disappointed? Are you realistic?
Well, Lola, I think people are going one of two ways after Sporting, and I think obviously it's not that simple, but people are either in the camp of Arsenal's level has dropped, we're passing backwards and sideways, they're scared, they're tired, this is it, we're going to throw away the season, or they won in a place where, I mean, Arteta said Sporting had won 17 games in a row at home. I haven't verified that, but they've definitely won a lot of games there, and they're definitely hard to play there, with the caveat that we went there and smashed them 5-1 in the league phase last season. And of course, they now have Luis Suarez instead of Victor Gyökeres, but not the Luis Suarez you think.
Well, one thing I would just say, though, like as a kind of rebuttal to the idea that it's always hard in Europe away from home, but I was fascinated by the fact that Forest rocked up at Porto last night. Forest in a relegation scrap and could have won the game. I think they had a second goal disallowed with VAR, but I do think that broadly reflects. I know that Liverpool didn't have a good week in Europe this week, and things did change a bit in the last 16 of the Champions League. But with all that said, obviously the level of the Premier League is just so much higher at the moment.
Yeah, and I broadly agree with you, and I think it's definitely was borne out in the league phase in terms of the Premier League superiority, and then everyone ends up having a different discussion when the Premier League teams get tired, when they get really tired. But anyway, in terms of
that sounded like Donald Trump, not the person you were trying to do an impression of.
In terms of Sporting Club de Portugal, obviously I feel massively positive because of the outcome. I do think that's a little bit outcomes bias. Like, it was always going to be a game basically after the first 10 minutes that we were going to nick. And I think that was partially about Arsenal's ambition and plan, and partially about the fact that Sporting were very good and it was a competitive game. But the fact is, we went and did something that didn't feel possible. And I think, for me, that game fits more into the canon of the games post-North London derby, pre-international break, than it does to a kind of wider Arsenal playing really well or Arsenal playing really badly. Because the fact is, I would argue if there is a rot, it's been there since the Chelsea game, and we've still been getting results. So the question is this run-in Arsenal capable of doing what we need them to do? And the answer is, I don't really know.
Yeah, run-ins. They can bring the best out of teams, and I've seen that in the Liverpool direction. I've seen us go on runs, reeling off 10, 11 straight victories in a row in 18-19, and even in the season where the Gerrard slip season, I mean, I hate to call it that, but that's what everyone remembers it for. You felt the season kind of picking up to sort of terminal velocity in this period. But equally, last season, I felt that Liverpool really limped over the line. And that's something that we'll go on to talk about in the Liverpool section of the show, is that was it run-in fatigue and nerves, or was it a sign of something more problematic in Liverpool's performances at this stage in the season? But yeah, I think with Arsenal, obviously what matters the most is getting over the line in the Premier League title race. And I think it's really important to put that into the narrative of the quadruple chat because of course media outlets are going to start talking about the quad. That is their job ultimately, to spin it into a wider story. But I felt like this at a point last season, when Liverpool quote unquote won the league phase of the Champions League, and we were well ahead in the title race, and people start talking about a quadruple, and then it's like you see headlines like, is it disappointing if Liverpool end the season with only one trophy? But of course, it's not disappointing. And there is a reason why no team has ever won the quadruple. So yeah, I want to ask you how you're feeling about that. I mean, I feel like I know the answer, but what in your mind is successful now for Arsenal?
I think, Lola, I'm grappling with the fact that I have seen a team at times this season that is undeniable in every competition. Around October, November time, Arsenal were playing really, really well. We were still getting pelters in the media, but we were playing really, really well, and it was easy. And we weren't conceding shots on target. Conceding a shot on target felt like a disaster in that period of time. What I'm reckoning with in terms of the quad run, which isn't a thing, is the fact that you can know the high watermark of your team. You can know the level when everything works. But I haven't seen everything work for quite a long time. And there are so many factors that go into that: fatigue, injuries. Sorry to say, Arsenal have had loads of injuries this season. Odegaard's just gone down again. We seem to keep getting injury updates from the Norway coach. Like, why does he know everything before we know it?
To be fair, one thing I would say is I just happened to catch on Twitter last night that Spurs have done an update that Kudus has had a setback in his injury recovery. And I was just thinking, there's nothing worse. Like we had it with Luis Diaz in 22-23. There's nothing worse than when you lose a player to like a fairly serious injury and you're just getting hope that they might come back and you hear about a setback. And then I was thinking about the fact that Kulusevski's been out for 333 days with a knock. So it could always be worse. You could always be a Tottenham fan.
Speaking of which, did you see the size difference in James Maddison's legs?
Apparently that was just a bad camera angle. But no,
Um,
let's go back to the quad talk because Phil Blundell of the Anfield Wrap got loads and loads of hate on Twitter for posting that Liverpool's 21-22 side taking the quadruple charge to the final game in all competitions because they took the title race to the final day and obviously lost in the Champions League final is one of the biggest achievements in modern football. And he took massive pelters for that from City fans being like, oh, what about the treble? But I think he's right, I think Arsenal's situation, I agree with you. There was a moment where they seemed to be able to hold everybody at arm's length. And that moment has passed. I think that Liverpool side to go as deep as they did and go so close to winning the quadruple is like a phenomenal achievement.
yeah, and I think I agree with you, and I think there's something about the season, and Pep is good at this somehow, is setting up your team to peak at the right time.
Yeah.
There's no doubt Arsenal have peaked this season, and I mean, in other run-ins, it's important to stress Arsenal have gone down the stretch and had massive runs in 23-24. But how much of that is informed by chasing? I was
Yeah.
going to ask you because with your quad run, obviously you were going like punch for punch with City, and sometimes I think necessity just produces something that a level of competitiveness that you might not otherwise have had. And I think probably being chased is a different mindset for Arsenal now.
But
And
we were chasing. I agree. I agree. By the way, I think you're absolutely right about that. But we were chasing City in that season because we had a terrible run around Christmas, lost away at Leicester, we drew at Chelsea, and we drew at Tottenham. And with, City had we had games in hand, but I think at one point we were 13 points behind. So it was a win or bust situation. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes necessity does bring excellent performances. But I think what's really in the context of Arsenal this season, I think what's fascinating about that Liverpool squad is the makeup of the squad. And people have talked all season about the strength of Arsenal's squad, and rightly so. Arsenal did something in the summer transfer window that worked, prioritizing Premier League experience and oven ready players that are going to be able to slot in. But in a way, I think the balance of that Liverpool 21-22 squad was better because there was a cohort of players who knew that they were second choice and seemed to be okay with that. And for what it's worth, I think Takumi Minamino is an unbelievable second choice option who knows that he is never going to start ahead of Mane, Salah, Firmino, and then we added Luis Diaz as well. So I think what worked about that was having the second string that was really high quality for a second string, but knew that they were never going to be in the first team. And I wonder with Arsenal if there has maybe been if the second string is almost a bit too good, and therefore that has like caused some selection headaches, maybe meant some players are overplayed, or that you just don't have a definite second choice
I,
team.
I think this sounds like someone who's not watched Arsenal's second string play, because believe me, they're not that good. And I think the point you're making is really about cohesion, and I actually disagree. I don't think Arsenal lack cohesion this season. I think one of Arteta's super strengths as a LinkedIn man manager is that he gets everybody pulling in the same direction and everyone's in the boat. I'm in the boat. The team's in the boat. Everyone's in the boat.
I hope the
So
boat
I
stays.
don't, I mean, I'm sure there's, Ethan Nwaneri went out on loan in January, which, kind of looks like a bad decision. That doesn't kind of look like a bad decision. It looks like a bad decision now, particularly because the manager who signed him, then disappeared weeks later.
And
And obviously
turned up in North London.
turned up to foil our treble bid. Um, but Miles Lewis Skelly, a player who I've seen his high watermark. He has not hit his high watermark whatsoever this season, apart from maybe once when he ran the length of the pitch against Atletico and fed it to Martinelli for a beautiful goal. And that's been hard actually. I think maybe when you talk about the second string and knowing their place, perhaps it's also about the second string being able to find a level of consistency in that inconsistency, if that makes sense. Because to be honest, I actually think one of the big problems with this Arsenal squad is that, you get to the Christian Mosqueras and the Piero Hincapiés, and to be fair to Hincapié, he has now probably made himself first choice left back, but he's injured obviously at the moment because obviously someone has to be injured.
But Scarlett, one thing you say about rhythm, I just want to pick up on that because I think it's really important, is you only get the rhythm for the second string by going deep in the cup competitions. And that is what happened for Liverpool in 21-22, was obviously we win the Carabao Cup final, and like the timing of it means that you're then in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup very swiftly after that. But they were getting a game basically, if not every week, every 10 days, they were getting a game. And again, it goes, but the nature of the old Champions League group stage, for example, was you win 3 games and you're into the last 16. So then we put out an incredible second string in Milan at the San Siro, where Nat Phillips famously did a kind of drag back in his own penalty area, which was unbelievable. But what I'm saying is, I think potentially because of injuries, maybe, and also because they're really good, lots of the Arsenal second string haven't had that rhythm of okay, 1 game a week or 1 game every 10
I
days.
mean, again, like Arsenal have gone deep in the cup competitions. Like, I think that's part of the problem with the quad charge becoming a narrative, because, as you say, obviously it's probably not possible. But the further you go, the more it becomes this albatross where people want to say that you failed if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
But we got to the League Cup final and the FA Cup quarter final. I think you have to say that's pretty deep. I don't think it's an issue of the second string not playing, or maybe not playing regularly enough. Obviously, there's been some chopping and changing. And maybe it is just a case of players who need to play at a very regular cadence to reach their best levels, or maybe it's a confidence thing. I don't know. But I actually think what I've seen from these sort of second tier guys in the squad has often been, wow, like we have this illusion of optionality. We have this illusion that we have a player called Gabriel Jesus who's got a trick up his sleeve, who's got some beautiful whipped finishes into the far corner, who can chop a man and send him back to Brazil. But that is not the Gabriel Jesus who has risen again to walk in this Arsenal team after a long injury. That's not who he is anymore. And Gabriel Jesus looked bang average against Mansfield, bang average anonymous against Southampton. Gabriel Martinelli he can only play in the Champions League. He can only play in the Champions League. I don't know why.
But you make a good point about confidence, and I think that was the unique balance that Liverpool struck in 21-22, was that the second string were thriving when they did play. So like I think Minamino was our top scorer in the Carabao Cup that season. And actually Jota, who at the time was considered like the fourth striker, he was brilliant in the cups. He had some huge moments. Like in the Carabao Cup quarterfinals just before Christmas, he hauls us back into the game and scores the winning penalty. And then also Oxlade-Chamberlain, I have to mention him. When Salah went away to AFCON, Salah and Mane, he chipped in with a few goals. So it was one of those where it felt like everybody was in good form. There was almost nobody who seemed to whose confidence was low, and confidence is everything. Before we go, we need to talk about the run-in and confidence. How do you see the kind of general vibe in the Arsenal group now after the Sporting thing? Do you think they feel that the rot stopped and they're kind of ready to embrace the pressure, or do you feel like they're kind of like feeling their way in the dark through the run-in, and they're just going to be grateful to find a chink of light, which is winning the Premier League at the end of the season?
Well, I think that's the funny quirk about this period of the season, which is that a ball hasn't been kicked in the league since early March. And we were 9 points clear then. And the moment that we remained 9 points clear when City drew, or the moment that it was that City drew at West Ham, like that was such a high. That weekend was one of the highest I've been this season, and nothing has changed in the Premier League since then. But we've played
Mm.
3 games and lost two, and one of them was a cup final. So it's such an
And
odd,
against your direct rivals.
and against our and they outplayed us in the second half. So it in the second half. So it's such a weird situation psychologically, I think, because part of me thinks, well, I think we all know that the Premier League is what really matters to Arsenal, and nothing else quite has the level of anxiety and the level of pressure. You know what it's like, Lola, when you're going for a Premier League. It just feels different. It's the thing that sucks the life out of English teams' European challenges, because it is absolutely all consuming from day one. Alexis McAllister called it like fucking hell or
No,
something.
Scarlett, we have to do the Platini quote, which is that English
Yeah.
clubs, lions in the winter, lambs in the spring. And yeah, because fucking European leagues move the fixtures around to benefit their teams, which, I only think it's cheating because the Premier League don't do it, and I think it should be the same for everyone. But like, fair play to the French Football Federation. They're protecting their coefficient. They need to protect their coefficient by PSG going deep in the Champions League, and the Premier League needs to follow. Like, they should follow suit. It's ridiculous. It's sorry, this is a bit of a rant, but it's the Premier League getting caught in this horrible middle ground of like the reason the league is the most successful and dominant in the world is because it's the most competitive, but it absolutely hinders the English teams in Europe. That's what I would say.
It would have been the case if we'd gone through to an FA Cup semi-final against Southampton. And it is even more the case because we lost those games. Um, and okay, so we went away in Europe and we got a result that I think probably takes the pressure off slightly, but only slightly. Like, this game is absolutely everything, and I think everyone in the club knows that. I'm desperately hoping Saka and Timber can be back, but I know that neither of them trained yesterday. Odegaard is now a doubt again, so our injury
The
woes
injury
are not.
crisis.
But that's the point. Like, I wish it was an injury crisis, and that is part of the conversation we were having about when you peak as a team. Like, Saka has been protected all season, so clearly there is something wrong with him. I don't think he's been mismanaged in any way. He only played 3 games in a week once this season, so
Well, the
he's not.
mistakes were made with Saka years ago now. Like,
Possibly, and I'm just hoping that he has the chance to be protected a bit and can come back to his best level. But it's really sad. Um, and then Odegaard, fantastic player, but I have not seen Odegaard be Odegaard in a long time. This is a tangent. The point is, I'm hoping that what happens is everybody is protected from the kind of muck of the international break and in as good shape as they can be for the Bournemouth game, because that feels, I mean, I feel scared even thinking about it. And it's like when you're waiting for, I don't know, to do like an exam, and like you can't think about it because even thinking about it makes you nervous.
It's
Um,
it's got look, it's a kind fixture because Bournemouth really, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what they're on points wise in the race for Champions League. Every team below Liverpool and Chelsea should be thinking they have a chance. I
Bournemouth,
don't.
go to the beach, off you go.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean. They live on the beach, literally, so they should be on the beach. But they probably won't be because that's
They
not
won't.
how the Premier League really works. But the 12:30 kickoff thing, it might be a bit flat. That's the only thing that I'm thinking could go against you. But look, that is where we have to leave it today. That has been your goal difference. Once again, we apologise for not being more regular with our episodes. We're working on it, but hey, I got a new job. I'm really busy, and that is where I have to go now. And Scarlett, equally, you're working on a really exciting new project, which I'm sure we'll tell the listeners about in due course. For now, on that bombshell, that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye bye.